Thank you so much, Kim. What a moving address. So honored that you shared your story with us, and uh, so thankful for all you have done and continue to do to help our nation's service members and veterans. With that, it is now time for our first panel of the day. So, five-star panelists, please start making your way to the virtual stage just by turning on your microphones and cameras. We will reserve the last 5 or 10 minutes of today's panel for questions. So everyone in attendance, please, any questions that come to mind, enter them into chat, and I will circle back to all of those questions in the last 5 or 10 minutes. Our first panel is a special one as it features organizations that have earned the highest possible recognition in the Vets Index's Employer Awards, five-star employer. To get this award, employers really need to distinguish themselves. So everyone on here has really, shown they have what it takes. As I mentioned during the opening remarks, the 2024 Vets Index's Employer Award survey is going to launch in just a few weeks. So if you haven't participated before, now is the perfect time to get involved. Again, you can register your invitation at vetsindexes.com/employer-awards. And with that, let's start jumping into the first panel. This panel focuses on what organizations can do to recruit and also to support employees who are currently in the National Guard and Reserves. Hiring employees in the Guard and Reserves comes with some great unique benefits. And it also comes with some unique rules and challenges that you have to be aware of. And I am joined by an amazing panel who will delve into these issues for us. We have John Perez, Head of Military and Veteran Affairs at Johnson & Johnson. Hi, John. Please turn on your camera if you could. Gary Patton, Vice President for Veterans and Military Affairs at CACI International. Peter Bermont, Global Business Resiliency Fellow at Fiserv. Sorry about that stumble. And James Combs, Board of Directors member and National Vice Chair for Strategy at ESGR, Employer Support of the Guard and Reserve, which is an organization that exists to kind of help companies and other employers better serve Guard and Reserve members. So welcome panelists. We have a ton to discuss and only 40 minutes allotted for this panel. So let's just dive right into it. And I'll start with a question that I'll just make as a toss up to anyone. Feel free to jump in and answer if you like. What is the benefit for your organization for hiring Guard and Reserve members? What do they bring to the table, and what's the advantage, for you all to pursue Guard and Reserve members? Don't be shy. Just jump in.
Well, in the absence of anyone else stepping up, let me go ahead and address that quickly. I am a 42-year veteran of the Guard and Reserve, also a employer of Guard and Reserve members over that period of time. And I will just say this, that there is a profound investment in training and leadership development in the part of all of our Guard and Reserve members, and an extraordinary broad range of experiences that can be brought to bear in any organization. And if you're a business individual and you're hiring, I can assure you through my own testament that these individuals are rock solid from a value standpoint. And they have been imbued with an educational process that has really enhanced their international experience, their leadership skill sets, and so forth. And what you find is that they have many skill sets that are directly aligned to civilian activities. So these are just a couple of things, but I will tell you the driving force behind any Guard and Reserve member is their sense of duty and their sense of obligation and mission. You won't find anybody that will surpass them in that context. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll come up next here. Thank you, Jim, and just echo a couple of things that he said and add maybe a couple other points. But I work for CACI, 35 years in the Army, and have been at CACI for over 7 years leading our Veterans and Military Affairs effort. And a big part of that effort is support recruiting, retention of our National Guard and Reserve employees. We have hundreds of them at CACI. Just a couple of years ago, at the height of COVID, we had over 106 National Guard and Reserve employees who were on active duty, called to serve on the front lines of COVID, on the front lines of the wildfires across the Pacific Northwest, and other important missions. And just like Jim said, our National Guard and Reservist employees go off to serve, and when they return, they enrich our company. They enrich our company with uh, all the values that Jim mentioned, but also their skill sets that, in many, many cases, remain relevant through the training and the experience and their actual service that they're performing while in uniform. And so when they come back to the company, they enrich our our performance and make us a better company, frankly, in the ways that we support our customers. Our military and veterans outreach campaign at CHI is called Continue Your Mission with CHI. Well, nobody embodies that slogan more so than our National Guard and Reservist employees, who are citizen soldiers and then return to the company and continue their mission. And in many cases, the work they do for our company align very directly with the missions that they're performing in uniform. It's just a perfect relationship. They make our company better. And on top of all that, because we're a national security company and perform a lot of work in classified environments, another uh, strong value of our National Guard and Reservist employees is their active clearances, which allow them to work in the classified environments where we provide support to the DoD customers, customers within the intelligence community, and other customers across the federal government. Thank you.
Well, I'm happy to jump in next. And I think it's so important that we start with this idea of this population is purpose-driven and values-based. And that is exactly what we're looking for, certainly at Johnson & Johnson, the largest healthcare products company in the world. That's who we are, right? We're driven by a purpose of changing the trajectory of health for humanity. And we're grounded in our values, in our case, embodied in a document we call our credo. For us, we've been supporting this population since, as employees in particular, since 1898, when we first held positions for employees who volunteered to serve during the Spanish-American War, and that continues to this day. But again, the reason why, the most important thing, because then you'll figure out as an organization how you might best do that and deliver the most value for everybody. It's because they're purpose-driven and values-based, because they have broad skills that are often applicable in almost any role that you might be in. And then they have deep technical knowledge. In some roles where deep technical knowledge is important, and they're going to continue to go and develop those different things. Right? If you're a surgeon in the military, gosh, that's incredibly important to hone that skill. And by the way, at Johnson & Johnson, we have lots of folks who need that deep expertise as well. So purpose-driven, values-based, broad skills applicable in any role you might be in, and then in many cases, deep technical knowledge in specific fields.
And I'd love to jump in next as well. I just want to say, Gary, I think you love veterans because we've all passed our, derivative classification training that we have to take online every year. But in all seriousness, I'm currently serving Coast Guard Reserve member, and for the past handful of years, my biggest takeaway, and something I talk to many other Guard and Reserve members and veterans as well, is that it's a dichotomy of thinking. Currently work in the private sector. My first professional experience was with government and the military. It's very different thinking, and being an active reserve member means that I'm constantly complaining about both. At the same time, I'm also bringing good ideas back and forth, which makes me very grateful that I can come to the table with something that I may have thought was dumb on one side, but actually works really well on the other. But it's a great thing, and I think it takes a while for people to realize that, we all had to grow up, after our first, introduction into the military, and realize what we got from that. I like to think I get reminded of that, every month and at least for 2 weeks a year. So.
Excellent, excellent, great. So we talked about the why focus on recruiting Guard and Reserve members. Now let's talk about the how and the where. What have you all found are, kind of some of the best resources, best methods for sourcing good Guard and Reserve talent?
And I'll take a first swing at this, but I know everybody's got something to add in. Especially Jim, because I'd like to start by saying the ESGR is an excellent resource. So there's a plug for the ESGR. I mean, if I get any questions in a company about Guard and Reserve affairs, I call the ESGR representatives, and they are tremendously helpful in helping you sort of navigate the law, the policies, and some of the challenges that may arise in calls to active duty, annual training, and those things that come up in the day-to-day employment of National Guard and Reservists. But aside from that, to answer the question of where do you go to find the job-seeking National Guard and Reservists, veteran service organizations are a good place. The federal and state veterans employment counseling offices and so forth also help out, but the National Guard has transition assistance programs located in every state, so staying connected with them. Those are the guards, and those are the guardsmen who are have decided to transition out of the Guard. At those other venues I mentioned, you find people who are still active but are looking and seeking alternate or subsequent forms of employment. So they pop pretty much everywhere I go and talk to veterans and transitioning service members. You're likely to find current serving Guard and Reservists who are also looking for work as well. And I think there's just some of the services I think have begun other programs. Maybe Jim will talk about the Office of the Chief of Army Reserve, which now has regional liaisons and counselors in different parts of the country and connect employers with job-seeking reservists as well. But the other thing I'll just add is that especially as a federal government contracting company like CACI, we connect with a lot of our guardsmen and reservists through the network, through their networks that have been established with our own employees and with our employees who are former guardsmen and reservists. And that's a very, very powerful network. And I would say, we probably make as many contacts that way as through some of the other sources. So I would encourage the employers to be look at networks that your employees belong to, personal networks, professional networks, and exploit those networks so that you can get the word out to their networks of Guard and Reservists who are looking for work and can find some of your employment leads that way. That's been a very, very successful means for us. Essentially, writing on the partner networks, colleague peer networks that already exist among our current cohort of Guard and Reserve employees. Thank you.
Gary, since you gave me a kind of an intro there, I'll take advantage of it. ESGR goes out and talks to literally every organization in the Guard and Reserve on an annual basis. That's typically what we do. We offer insights on USERRA, but one of the things that we've discovered, not because it's a part of our mission in terms of getting people employed, but this is a common subject that often comes up. There are about 5 different places that we find that most of the Guard and Reserve members migrate toward in terms of seeking ways to typically either find a job, but more importantly, usually looking for a new career field and or feeling, if you will, underutilized in the job they're in, and they want to improve their situation based on their experiences as Guard and Reserve members. I would say the first one is the Department of Labor Job Centers. And they do have a special outreach program for employers that you can sign up for that will allow individuals to see that you're interested in hiring the Guard and Reserve. And we found that they have something like 2,400 offices throughout the United States that serve that purpose. And they offer counseling, interview efforts, and how to seek a job and how to become connected within the network. So, Yeah, Department of Labor does a great job, in my judgment, in how they work that. For some of you, the Work for Warrior program, which is a Guard state and federally funded program, is specifically designed to find work for guardsmen and or any branch of the reserve services through all 7. And those are California, Georgia, Indiana, Mississippi, Nevada, Arizona, Washington, Louisiana, Texas, and Hawaii. The reason I mention those is because they spend all their time, usually a core group of about 16 people, and they are seeking employers to sign up with their program so that they can place Guard and Reserve members. So that can be a very effective resource as well within those 10 states. Another area that we found they use a lot, and Gary did a good job of introducing it, and that is the public-private partnership program with the Army Reserve. That program currently is soliciting employers to become partnered with them so that they can refer their members to them, and in the interest of building financial stability for the Guard Reserve members. And they have, in fact, partnered with 2 other platforms that they leverage heavily, and that is vetjobs.org and recruitmilitary.com. Those 2 also list employers that are interested in employing Guard and Reserve, and it's a go-to site for many of the Army Reservists, which are second largest component. And then the only other one I might mention to you is that locally, and Gary again mentioned this, if you are interested in finding out how you can outreach and become involved with the Guard elements, I would finally underscore the Work for Warrior. If you in fact contact them, they have an ongoing list of individuals seeking jobs. It's one of the few that actually have that within each state that is represented there. So certainly would encourage that as well. That's all I have. Thank you.
I love the thoughts and the ideas there, and they are great ones. I take a step back and say, I think a great way to begin this thought and planning is thinking through the subpopulations and what your needs are as an organization. So when I say subpopulations, right, being a member of the Guard or Reserve is not some monolithic thing, right? There's all different job levels, there's years of experience, there's functions, there's technical skill sets. So right here, there's not one way to go and approach it. You're going to probably vary it and navigate that sea of goodwill of support and organizations and resources that are focused on employment issues and navigate those. Some are going to be better than others, right? Some are going to be better for non-degreed, 5 years or fewer professional experience. Others might be better at 20 plus years of experience. Some might be great for sub issues and focus areas, right? So in my life sciences space, there's a very tiny, small nonprofit, but doing great things that's just focused on careers in life science called MedTech Vets. So good organization, very, very niche on what it's focused on, right? Careers in life science, but there's many Guard and Reserve members that are members of that organization. So for my organization, partnering there makes a lot of sense. Why? Because I'm looking for a very narrow industry focus with certain technical expertise in that example. Other great organizations that might be more generalist, right, and navigating that, like a Hiring Our Heroes through the U.S. Chamber, just to name some other community organizations, might be another good augmentation, and that covers more personas, right? So that you could find somebody who's a 20 plus year E7 or E8 through that. You could find an 06, you could find an 03, you could find E3 through E7 as well, right? So I'd say that you really should start with thinking not of the Guard and Reserve population as some monolith, but rather starting with saying, well, what talent do we need? Then how do I break down that population, other personas? And then let me come up with my strategy. Which government initiatives make most sense at the federal, state, local level to go and pursue? What community-based organizations? And I'll just end by a quick plug and emphasize Gary's comment of leverage your employee referral network. Right, to have a great Guard and Reserve community within your company, leverage that for referrals. Right, it's always a great way. You know that people are trying to bring in top talent because people want to work with people they know align with their purpose and values and the type of work that they're trying to go do. So leveraging that is great. It's been very successful also within J&J.
I would definitely like to add the community aspect here at Fiserv is specifically going out into the community. And we're not just talking about talent acquisition folks and human resources folks, but our group of veteran Guard and reservists. We're located in Berkeley Heights, New Jersey. Wink, wink. We're doing a lot of recruiting, but we're about an hour and 20 minutes away from Joint Base McGuire Fort Dix Landers. There's a lot of reservists there, guardsmen, people transitioning out. It's a great way to try and engage with some of the units directly, but just the Transition Assistance Program office, right? They're always looking to help people out, and that they can help. Which has been a great success for us is connecting us with some of the senior enlisted leadership in the area. Those really focused on people. And a tip of the hat to everyone out there that is our senior enlisted leaders. You've been a huge help to us here at Fiserv. In addition to that, Department of Labor, our local Department of Labor reps have been tremendous at just saying, you want an event? We'll spin one up right now. We're like, all right, great. This is, it's really effective. I think there's two things, right? For veterans, right? You have families, you may have gotten out for a reason. You don't want to move across the country for that next job because you got to go into the office now. Reaching out to the community and actually meeting the people who are facilitating, the local jobs in the area is a huge thing. On the flip side, I think from the organizational perspective, there's a lot of people who are willing to move, and the wider you can get the word out and say, hey, we got jobs in all these places, are you willing to, relocate? That's huge too. But the community approach is definitely, I think, new, especially in a post-COVID world. We're getting out there and actually, gripping and grinning and saying, hey, we have jobs and we want, veterans, Guard, Reserve, family, if you know how to serve, we want you. So that was a great point, John. Thank you for bringing that up.
Excellent. So this has been a great panel so far. We already are about halfway through, only 20 minutes left. So I'm going to combine our next two questions because they were both for Jim Combs with ESGR. And Jim, if you could just kind of take these one after another. First, if you could explain to everyone the two typical types of leave that Guard and Reserve members are going to frequently need to take. And secondly, talk through what USERA is and, kind of what are the most important guideposts employers need to follow to make sure they're staying on the right side of it.
Thank you, Jared. We have to do that. With regard to the two types, I'm going to run the risk of not being detailed enough, but I just want to give you a broad brush look at this. There are fundamentally two types. There are those organizations that are in the regular training format. And what do I mean by that? These are your typical Guard and Reserve members who have to do 1 weekend of drill each month, and they do 2 weeks of annual training. That, I would say, that is your typical. Now, among those are also initial training. If you have an employee that's a member of the Guard and Reserve and they're going to initial training, they will likely be gone for 12 weeks. And that's for basic and advanced training. If you have an individual that's in the Guard and Reserve and they are a non-commissioned officer, they generally will have some type of training every 3 years, either in the leadership capacity or in a skill set development capacity. And then finally, during the call of the governor, and this is typically a Guard issue, governors have the authority to bring guardsmen to duty in a variety of different tasks, whether it's for a crisis at home like floods, fires, tornadoes, hurricanes, you name the event. But those are typically 30 days or less. There's, on rare occasion, a longer stint for things like border augmentation for security. And there may be other types of unique individual things that may go longer, but these are rare. So I would say that your typical utilization of a Guard or Reserve members being drawn away from the employment work environment would be 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks out of the year. And in addition to that, there's this other standard, which is the federal mobilization standard. We refer to that as Title 10, or called to duty at the order of the President of the United States. When that occurs, that can go from anywhere from 30 days typically to a year. And we find that each branch of service has their own limitation. Example, Marines and Air Force typically are 30 days to 6 months at the most. Whereas the Army, Army Reserve, Army Guard, that they are typically 1 year in duration. And they are augmenting our active forces around the world and security operations of one kind or another. How often does that happen? That would be the question you're probably having. We have about 800,000 Guard and Reserve members. Of that 800,000, we on average have 2 to 4% that are being called to duty. And they normally only being called to duty once every 4 years. This is a relatively typical, but there are exceptions to everything I've said. And I'm sure Peter can give you some more insight on that as a result of that call to duty. But that's in effect where we stand with that. But I got to tell you, the Guard and Reserve is 38% of our deployable strength. We cannot sustain our Army anywhere in the world or any one of our branches without the augmentation of the Guard and Reserve. And so consequently, it is absolutely essential that they be made available, or we can find ourselves in some serious trouble. And we're finding that particularly true today, where the numbers of available youth qualifying for military service have been dramatically dropping. So reliance on the Guard and Reserve has actually been going up slightly. Not as high, obviously, as during our major deployment windows after 9/11, but they still staying right around 3 to 4%. So in the wisdom of those that have gone before us, and we moved to all volunteer Army after Vietnam, and I'm a Vietnam veteran that has literally lived in the military for 42 years. So I have seen the evolution of the Uniformed Service Employment Reemployment Rights Act. Now, this act was designed to help do several things. One, to calibrate expectations on the part of the employer and the service member, to set their responsibilities so that there is a reasonable understanding what each should do for the other to make sustaining our Guard and Reserve plausible into the future. And that the only way we're going to do that is all of us understand our responsibilities within this particular act. And so I will cover it briefly, but I want to say right up front, our normal orientation on USERRA is about a 2-hour session. So I'm going to just hit some key highlights and give you some references that will really help you a lot. And the number one reference is esgr.mil. That has everything you ever want to know about USERRA. And they have reference material, some of which I believe have been posted for this particular program, that really outlines in detail everything you as an employer would want to understand about USERRA, because I can't cover things like the 5-year limit, the termination protections. I can go on and on. The most frequently asked questions are really what I'll try and get to right now, and this will take me about 2 minutes. There are 3 tenets of protection that USERRA really offers from an employer perspective. They want a protection against discrimination, protection against retaliation on the part of a supervisor or an organization, and reemployment following their military service. And they should be reemployed as though they were always there. And that in reference to any benefits that could be accrued while they're performing the duty. It's important to understand that this covers both private and public employers, regardless of the size of the organization. Another important element is that it does not apply if you're self-employed and or independent contractor, or if you will, a non-recurrent employee in one form or another. The act will not directly apply to them. It also applies to voluntary as well as involuntary. Now, what do I mean by that? Some individuals can volunteer themselves to perform specific duties. We find this particularly important in high skill set areas such as military intelligence and such. And so that can be extremely important. So what are the employer responsibilities in USERRA? Fundamentally, to allow excused leave of absence, prompt reinstatement once they return from duty, restore the seniority once they've gotten back, reinstate all their benefits once they're back on board, and then training and refresher skills to transition them back into the organization, and no retaliation as a result of past, current, or future calls to duty. One of the biggest questions we get from employer is, well, if they leave for 30 days, 180 days, or 180 plus, when do they have to report back to work? And it does vary, and I'll just hit it quickly. If it's 1 to 30 days, they have to be back within 8 hours of reasonable travel time. If it's 31 to 180 days, then they have to be back to work within 14 calendar days. And if it's at 181 days or more, then they have 90 days in which to reapply. We do place tremendous emphasis on the part of our Guard Reserve members to stay in communication with the employer, notifying when you're leaving and notifying when you return, and be sure you provide their orders. If during this process an employer senses any issues, then we have resources available to immediately assist that employer, whether it's a customer service helpline at esdr.mil or contacting the individual's military unit and talking to their chain of command. There are exceptions to being deployed. A chain of command can address those with an employer, and we find that oftentimes those dialogues can be very fruitful. But typically, if it's a presidential call, it's very difficult then to negotiate. But in most all other calls, a dialogue with the chain of command is very, very fruitful. So again, these are just right at the surface. So I want to defer to our other panelists who obviously have had experience dealing with this on what your thoughts might be with regard to application of USERRA law.
And let me just jump in before the other panelists weigh in, just because we are very short on time. We're just, I think, 9 minutes left in this panel. So let me just kind of add to that question something that may give you all a little more room to respond. And this will be our last question, then I'll turn to audience questions, of which I'm happy to see there are so many. So, USERRA, that's the law. Those are the rules that you absolutely have to follow. A lot of organizations try to, just kind of go beyond what's required and, try to go that extra mile for Guard members and reservists. So, please talk about not just how your organization tries to make sure you're staying in line with USERRA, but ways that you actually try to, take one step further.
Hey, thanks, George. Let me take a first swing at it. And I know everybody's got something to say on this one, so I'm going to try and keep it short. I would break these, going above and beyond into two categories. One is compensation and benefits. Another one is sort of cultural, in terms of creating a sense of belonging and inclusivity for our Guard and reservists. So on the first side, benefits and compensation, companies can create policies in which, at CACI, we provide a pay differential, which for 12 months while they're on active duty, you get the difference. You get your normal employee pay minus whatever military pay you received while you're on active duty. There's other things you can add into that policy. You can make your employee, give them opportunity to make up for pension, like 401k contributions when they return from active duty. They can be eligible for bonus and other incentive forms of incentive compensation. They can retain or waive their healthcare plan benefits and those sorts of things. I think that's just a sort of top of the wave tops there, rather, of the type of compensation and benefits. On the cultural side, you can do things. We celebrate the National Guard birthday. We have an honor wall for our National Guard and reservists that we post on Armed Forces Day. We send care packages to our Guard and reservists who are deployed overseas on active duty. We have a National Guard committee, which is part of our Veterans Employee Resource Group, that addresses, issues and subjects that are most relevant to our Guard and Reserve employees. And so those are just some of the things, on the cultural side of things, to create a sense of belonging and inclusivity for our Guardsmen and reservists who are employees, in addition to the compensation and benefit policies you can put in place.
And Gary, I love the framework that you did there of compensation and benefits and then inclusion. And so let me say for compensation and benefits for J&J, right? So we do pay on top of, so you keep your full J&J pay and benefits, whether you're activated for any reason. It could be training, could be a traditional employment, right? All the different things that we just heard about before. You keep your full pay and benefits for up to 3 continuous years. Shout out to Fiserv on actually a lot of, as we were enhancing that policy for J&J, because we historically had done a differential, in more recent years had done a differential, worked closely with the Fiserv team. It was so open in the benchmarking, and I think that's a great thing to say about this community. Folks that are focused on the military connected population share information, right? We think about this stuff. We want to do the right thing for our country, for our community. So quick shout out to Fiserv there. So J&J is pay on top of. We also give transition time off, so we give additional paid days off. That varies depending on the length of your activation, right? So if you're out for 2 weeks, you get a certain number of days, but if you're out for a year, you get a certain number of days. Similar cultural things to what Gary was talking about, so I won't reiterate those because I'm sensitive of time, but what I will say is there's one other element that I'd add into it, sort of a third pillar, and that's how do you build this into your regular HR processes, in particular your development processes, right? So as you think of somebody returning from, say, a 6-month activation or going to a specialized training, what we try to do is build into our regular processes discussions with HR and the line management such that they're baking that into an individual's development, right? So if something in your development plan says, lead a small team, right? They have greater opportunities for direct people management. Well, hey, if you just became a squad leader, in the Army and you just went to, your first NCO course, great. That should be baked into your J&J development because you just learned the principles of small team leadership, right? If you just spent a year leading a team in a really challenging turnaround environment in some reorganization within DoD somewhere, great. You've just learned how to go and do that thing. Let's bake it into the development plan for the individual. Let's make sure we're giving credit. Because often when you're going on an activation, it's not a time of skill atrophy. It's a time of skill enhancement. And sometimes you need to alter that, right? Maybe the technical skill that you were doing within a company is not the one you're doing within the military. And we need to bake into a plan how to gain that skill or enhance that skill that there actually might have been some atrophy if there was in a very technical area that you weren't doing. So being really purposeful and baking that into regular development conversation and normalizing that, I think, is such an important thing to add into the cultural inclusion. Yeah, I'm sorry to send it to you last, but I wanted to shout out to Fiserv and let you go out on the such great work from your entire team and organization and company to share with so many others.
John, thank you for that, because I think it was probably your hard work and the team here at Fiserv that benefited me so well. So the quick backstory, I was active duty for a few years. I got out like any good 24-year-olds. I found my way to Fiserv. And then somebody implanted the idea that it was a good idea to go back into the reserve. I did that. And then 3 months later, I get hit with the Title 10 orders for a year. And I learned the Fiserv policy really fast, and it was unbelievable. In reality, I was paid in full the entire time I was on Title 10 orders. That's life-changing. I experienced the pressure, right? Everything you do when you're getting ready, to pack up your bags and go, okay, my life's going to change for the next year. But knowing that the company had my back, I never experienced anything like that before. It was very, very different and unique. And the effort by companies out there like Fiserv, like Johnson & Johnson, that are going out of their way to not just make sure they're adhering to USERRA carefully, but also providing that pay to support them when their lives are changing dramatically is huge. It's the most thoughtful thing I can think of, is to provide that financial support in a time where there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty. So thanks to the people here and everybody, all the employers and people of those employers who are working on these policies to make serving as good as we can possibly do it. So thank you.
Excellent. Some really great information being shared on this panel today. And also, I'm so happy to see how active the chat is. A ton of questions, sadly, more than we have time to get to, but I'm also really happy to see that a lot of the questions being raised in chat are being answered in chat. So, please keep that going. One of the questions I've seen asked pretty frequently that I can answer right now and want to quickly. There's a lot of questions that are a flavor of, where can I get more information on, something related to Guard and Reserve? What is a good, helpful resource? I want to join all of my fellow panelists who have previously said this and say, ESGR, please talk to Jim, Bruce Townsend. They are a great resource, can be tremendously helpful. Absolutely, please do reach out to them. I also want to give a plug for ESGR, something I didn't realize until Jim mentioned it. A significant part of the ESGR workforce consists of volunteers who come from, large organizations, corporate America, organizations like your own, who are coming and volunteering. So, if that's something within your capabilities or, one of your colleagues, please do help. It's a very good, very important organization. It's 12:30 right now, but I'm going to try to push this just a little beyond time. Let's call this a lightning round. There is one question I wanted to put to all the panelists, and if you could just answer in just a sentence or two so we can not be too late ending this. It was a great question from Elizabeth Burnham asking how you train managers to understand and accommodate Guard and Reserve service, to understand this is something that is going to happen and you have to be ready for.
I'm happy to start on that one. I would say just kind of a couple principles on it. One is differentiate the discussion. So, right, sometimes there's like, well, let me just create one training that I could give to every hiring manager. Sometimes that may be necessary, certainly for massive organizations with tens of thousands of employees where the circumstances are very similar. That may be a great approach to it, but I would say certainly even for a company like a Johnson & Johnson, right, we're the largest healthcare products company, tens of thousands of employees in the U.S., hundreds of National Guard and Reserve members. To be honest, it's often much better for us to do individualized approach, have small group discussions that are tailored to the circumstances, because right, someone who is a newly enlisted individual working in a manufacturing wage environment, making a healthcare product is different than a 22-year, field grade officer who's doing a technical role like a pharmacist, like a PharmD type role. Having the conversations there on what are their activations like, what are their needs like, how can you be most inclusive? They need to be tailored based on other circumstances that are there. So I'd say sort of one is tailor it. The second quick thought is, yes, give the compliance stuff, but don't scare people away on complications of USERRA, right? People, especially at well-functioning organizations, trust that they're following labor laws, that they have the bureaucracy and systems and processes. Hiring managers may not need to go in depth on that in a way that, say, an HR professional needs to, or a person who's designing in your compensation and benefits, or if you're a large organization, they might need greater details of specifics to make sure you're building systems and tools. Hiring managers may not need that deep compliance. And in fact, if all you talk about is compliance, you miss the most important part, which, and I'll end with this, is the third is be positive about this. This is not a time of skill atrophy. This is a time of, hey, we're doing the right thing for our community. We're living probably into our values as an organization in supporting this population. And we're going to get talent that's even better for us when they return. Right. So we're doing the right thing. It's great for the country. It's great for our community. It's great for our actual organization and the core of what we're doing. So those are my quick three thoughts on training.
I think you have to hit it address it at multiple levels, regardless of the size of the company. But it starts with a comprehensive policy, a corporate policy that addresses the military leave, the compensation, maybe reinforces all of the USERRA key elements and that sort of thing. So you have a policy there that's sort of I think the structure for this, and then you hit it at multiple levels of training. We have modules for hiring managers. We have modules for HR business partners, who are essentially the HR specialists that oversee the HR policies and support for our different business sectors. And they most of the issues and questions and things are going to bubble up to their level. So having that level of expertise to deal with that, having the general, training out there for hiring managers, program managers, at the manager level, and then an overarching policy, I think, are three different sort of multi-echelon ways of providing that structure for your company. And then on top of that, you dump some of the cultural things that I mentioned on there, so that everybody in the company knows the value of a guardsman and reservist, and knows that we support them in their annual training, their deployments to active duty, nationally, internationally, or statewide missions, so that, you know, just like John and Peter and Jim have mentioned, you know, you just cannot understate, correction, you can't overstate the value that the guardsmen reservists bring in terms of enriching our company. And like John said, it's not a negative thing, it's an extremely positive thing. So it behooves everybody at every level to understand the sort of the ins and outs and the policies here to make it work and to enable their service to enrich our company in the end. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to call it at this point because we're about 5 minutes over. One other thing I should mention, there were a lot of questions in chat about whether this is being recorded and is viewable later. I mentioned at the outset, but I'll mention again for anyone who missed it. Yes, indeed, all of this is recorded and will be live on our website next week. We'll send a follow-up email with the links probably next week, so you can access that. We've had a jam-packed start to the day so far. Now it's time for a nice little break. Please get up, take a few minutes, stretch your legs, get a bite to eat. You'll want to be back by 12:50 Eastern time so you don't miss anything. Next up on the agenda is going to be a pair of breakout sessions. One focused on helping your veteran employees network, and another focused on recruiting military spouses, something I saw a few questions about in the chat. So to join one of these breakouts, you'll just need to click the Breakout Sessions tab in the left side navigation menu and choose the session that you want to view. Thanks to everyone, and we will see you soon.